This is A Geek Leader. Hey guys, welcome to episode 120 of A Geek Leader Podcast, and I'm your host, John Rauda, and today on the show we've got a guest. It's Christopher O'Donnell from HubSpot. And Christopher O'Donnell is a technologist, musician, public speaker. He's worked on dozens of web and mobile products over the years. We talk a lot about music and how music has influenced his career and his culture at HubSpot and how it's influenced his leadership. We talk about product development, autonomy. He talks about how he encourages his employees to think like an owner. So we talk a little bit about that. We talk about values, using values in your speech, and how to build great teams. And that's one of the things I've been kind of focusing on is what are the steps to build a great team. And we talk a little bit about raising the bar with your team, how everyone's a recruiter, and being patient when you hire people. We talk about being transparent and how to stretch your team and to get feedback, because feedback's important. It's important to create a culture of feedback. So we're going to talk some about that. So just stay tuned, listen to the episode, and I hope you guys enjoy it as much as I did, because I really enjoyed talking to Christopher about all these things. It's one of those things we give a different perspective, because sometimes from a software development perspective, it's different than the product owner and product manager perspective. So it was really good to get that side of this, and I hope you guys enjoy it. So with all that being said, give it up for Christopher O'Donnell. All right, Geek Leaders. Today on the show, we've got Christopher O'Donnell. He's a technologist, musician, public speaker, and he heads up the product team at HubSpot. So Chris, if you don't mind telling the audience just a little bit about your kind of career path, how you got to where you are, and kind of some of the things you're doing today, just to set some context for our conversation.
Absolutely. And first of all, thanks for having me on, John. I'm really excited for this. I love leadership and I love geeks. So this should be a lot of fun.
You're in the right place then.
No, I have sort of a weird background. I mean, the two things that I've always been involved in my life are technology and music in various different ways since I was a little kid. And, so I went to school for actually literally those two things, computers and music. Did sort of a Western, traditional Western music major, but with a CS component to it as well, and started coding when I was about 11 years old. And then, along the way, got into marketing and then product management, doing startups, hacking, building web apps. I know you have some passion for, the side projects and just building stuff and solving problems. And so I got bit by that bug in probably my mid-20s. Once I was into product management, I really started doing a lot more kind of hacking and building and prototyping and all that kind of stuff. I found it very useful for, communicating with engineers and everything. And then I was at a Series A funded startup called Performable. And then we were acquired in 2011 by HubSpot. HubSpot was maybe 200 employees at the time. And I don't know what it was, something like 40 million in revenue. And you have had basically 3 chapters over the course of the last 8 years at HubSpot. The first chapter being a frontline product manager on a very lean team, leading a replatforming of the product line at that time. Did that for a few years. Then I had a startup within a startup period that was really cool. I sort of gave away everything I'd been working on, started from a completely blank canvas, and ended up building a product that today is known as HubSpot Sales. That was sort of the second product. HubSpot Marketing was the first, HubSpot Sales was the second. And then 3 years ago, I took a role leading all of product management and UX design at HubSpot, working alongside our big, very productive engineering team and trying to really serve them with vision and with, whatever we can do to keep them excited. And that's been really fascinating. We're a publicly traded company now. Things have gone pretty well for us so far. We have 60 or 70,000 customers around the world. We have 8 offices around the world. We're close to 4,000 employees now. And it's been just totally humbling and a ton of fun. And more than anything, just a huge learning experience to try my hand at all these different things, and to have a very different job quarter to quarter, month to month as the team's grown. So it's been super cool. Today, my team is roughly 200 people, 100 on product management, 100 on UX and design. And we lead as peers. We are the peer leaders of 109 small autonomous teams that build the product that we bring to our customers.
Nice. And what's the culture like there? Because couple of years ago, we had Anthony Rodell on, and we talked a lot about culture, and it was like one of my favorite episodes because you heard about kind of this progressive, work environment that's extremely open. People communicate, people are friends, they like each other. Is it still like that? And kind of how does that work when it comes to working with different teams?
It is like that, absolutely. And we are somewhere in the neighborhood of 600, including all of engineering. It's something like 400 engineers in addition to my team. Anthony's great. Anthony's a key leader here on our content products, and
Mm-hmm.
he's done really well. He's been a huge part of the culture, and I suspect that basically everything he said a couple of years ago would still be true today. The teams have remained very autonomous. I think the trick is, how do you get the upsides of that autonomy? The upsides are productivity and fun, excitement that leads to employee retention. The employee retention leads to deeper institutional knowledge and the opportunity to build future leaders, and for those folks, as they become leaders themselves, to build the next generation and so forth. So there's a really great flywheel effect that happens there. The downsides are just trying to understand the right level of direction for the teams, how much to put our thumb on the scale in leadership, and in terms of kind of telling them what to do, and giving them guardrails in addition to goals. So I would say it's still that way. The team is super fun. I mean, people get along really well. It's apolitical. It's very inclusive. Yeah, people can make their own hours and come and go. Lots of people work from home, but people work really hard. And one of the things that's been amazing to see is that our team is more productive than ever, and not just on an overall basis, but even on an individual basis. We just see people getting more and more excited as the company grows, as the opportunity grows, and that's really cool. That's very cool to see. A lot of companies in our position would go to production, and your listeners may find this
Mm-hmm.
kind of cool. Going to production with pull requests, actual changes to code. A lot of companies in our position, maybe running sprints every couple of weeks, or do a monthly release, maybe a weekly release with bug fixes or whatever. And we go to production on average 869 times a day.
Wow. Yeah, that's super impressive, and that's awesome. Yeah, and I've seen companies that do both sides of things. I actually worked at a company where we did quarterly releases at one point.
Sure.
This
Oh
is
yeah.
a decade ago, and then we moved it up to monthly releases. And at that point, I remember I told my boss when I was managing a web and mobile development team at the time that we were going to move to twice a week releases. He's like, that's not possible. That's not possible. And I'm like, yeah, sure, we can do it. And before I left, we were going twice a week. And then I look at my wife's company. She's like, twice a week? We do about 200 a day. I'm like, what? So
Well,
yeah, 800 a day. That's crazy.
I just think, I think it goes in one of those two directions. And if you're doing something quarterly, eventually it'll be annual. And if you're doing monthly, and you move to biweekly, and then you move to semi-weekly, and then you move, you will
Yeah,
go in that direction, because it's just the
it's
feedback
progress, right?
cycle. Well, yeah, in the feedback cycle, when you're going smaller in terms, and more rapid in terms of deployment, you continue to go in that direction, and the changes become smaller and smaller, and you become faster and faster, and you get better and better tooling to be able to support that type of culture. I mean, you can't just you know fat finger a bunch of stuff and throw it into production. I mean, you need obviously you need automated testing. You need a culture of ownership. You need obviously things like APM, and monitoring of core business metrics. We've kind of known this as an industry for a while, and the more you get into that culture and solve problems in that direction, the faster you go. The smaller your atomic unit becomes of going to production. And on the other side, if let's say you have a monthly release, and theoretically it goes out and it's not actually perfect,
Mm-hmm.
because it's a huge change set, and there are lots of unexpected behaviors in production. If there's somebody out there who has a QA environment that perfectly mirrors production, I'd love to meet them, because I've never actually met anybody who has that. We would love one. It would cost way too much money. Um, and so you have a big change set, you bring it out, it is brittle and hard to fix. It's hard to run down all the issues. It's a bad customer experience. And then leaders and executives are subsequently in rooms talking about what additional things they need to do before they go to production. And so the 1 month turns into quarterly, and so it's really, I think, a very interesting cultural crossroads.
Yeah, there's a couple of things you mentioned there that I think are important. Autonomy is one. You have to have, or give your employees autonomy, but also you mentioned a culture of ownership, which is, I really like the way you put that, because it's one of the things that, some managers and leaders fear when they say, I want to give you freedom, but, how do I hold you accountable, or what is the ownership there? But if someone takes ownership, it's a little bit different approach. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things we did recently as in the last 12 months, was to articulate our product values. And we realized that we had a lot of this culture that people who had been here for a long time knew. I mean, it's like our DNA, and that as we grew, not everybody who was coming in the door automatically was going to know all this stuff. So, okay, let's sit down and articulate our product values and put them out there and really talk about them and celebrate them. And that was a great idea, by the way. It was like a really, really cool thing. Number one is think like an owner, and to take it away from software for a second, do you live in a culture at work where if there's a candy wrapper on the floor and somebody walks by, they're going to pick it up and throw it away, even if it isn't theirs?
Yeah, that's good. Yeah. And, how do you, is documenting one of the ways that you guys instilled that? Because you mentioned that's kind of a new thing, but you obviously had the culture there before you put this in place.
Yeah, documenting it has helped a lot. And then talking about it. It's not enough to just kind of publish the wiki post, but when you get up in front of the team at Tech Talk and, the kinds of events, really using it in performance reviews, using it in retros and 5 Whys, using it in all of these places so that people kind of see what a good job looks like through the lens of those values. Like, this was the right way to respond to this because we were thinking like an owner. This was the right thing for us to do with this team move because we value growing generations of future leaders. Of course, you think, well, why wouldn't you do that? Well, I mean, there's a cost to it. And an investment in that, and that might not be your strategy, but that's our strategy, and all that. I mean, what we've had to do to make the ownership model work, we think about it in terms of goals and guardrails. So if you give a team ownership over a series of deployables, and by the way, it's nice to be on a podcast where, folks are hands-on keyboard software engineers who kind of get into the details. But, if you're trying to give teams autonomy, it starts with them owning deployables, owning repositories, and carrying the pager on that stuff. That's where it starts. It's like, look, we're going to trust you to find the right balance between new feature development, tech debt, yada, yada, yada. And if this thing flaps at 3 a.m, there isn't a DevOps team that's going to handle it. You're up. Yeah. You and your friends on your 5-person team, you're up and you're dealing with it. And that got us pretty far. What we've done recently is give teams like a hierarchy of needs, where at the bottom of that hierarchy is security, and then above that is reliability, then performance, then usability, then value, which is sort of features, and then growth, like conversion rate optimization and supporting marketing and sales and that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like a Maslow's hierarchy of needs in a way.
Yeah.
So if you have, if there's something that you could do to make the product more secure, and that has been kind of brought up and discussed, and of course we track it, with an issue tracker and all the rest of that, you're going to do that before you do anything else. Or if you have usability issues on features you recently released, and about those, and we have ways of collecting those and tracking those and sort of sanity checking how long we've let them be out in the wild, you have to resolve those before you go add a bunch of new features. And so that took us a couple of years to give teams an automated view of all of that stuff and kind of red, yellow, green on each of those levels. But that buys us, I think, 10 more years of trusting the teams to make these decisions. But we did get out, over our skis a little bit by having a lot of autonomy, but not having the full picture of how the product was doing in front of the teams. So, that's part of it too, is like, you really have to invest in the tooling and, the technology to support the culture that you're going after, because that stuff doesn't just appear out of thin air.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good point, because sometimes people say, "Oh, we're just going to do this thing," but they don't have anything, behind it to support it. I remember when, years ago, in one of my old companies, we made the switch from waterfall to Scrum, and it was like, okay, we're going to do a Scrum, but we don't have any tools. We don't have any software project management tools that, we don't have any boards that will allow us. We don't have Jira. We don't have anything like that could do these. Scrum. So, we went the old school way with a board and sticky notes, but until we could have the technology that would support it.
And you have to improvise, Yeah. You got to improvise. And, one of the things that we do to that point is we walk around the building and look at what teams have up on their whiteboards. And, that's really cool. And it's cool to see that teams actually have that hierarchy up on the whiteboards after we sort of rolled it out and tried to popularize it. It's for us, it's less about enforcing things. I mean, we do kind of enforce it, and there is sort of a transparency around how everybody's doing against those goals. But it's so much more about getting something to be the cool way to do it. I mean, in my experience, creatives in general, and I put software engineers high on the list of creative professions. Folks are motivated by being around great people they want to learn from and impressing them, and having a workflow and the ability to communicate in effective ways. And so from a leadership perspective, we're there to try to just serve that need. These engineers are coming in, they want to get work done. They're looking for the best direction to go. They're looking for the best data on how they're doing. And we focus there in the tooling around that, as opposed to the tooling around predictable new feature release dates or anything like that. We've de-optimized a bunch of things because, we just get a better result.
I love the way you said that, de-optimizing things because you get a better result. Because there's so many folks that I've worked with that says, well, how can we optimize this the most we possibly can? Well, sometimes you can over-optimize things. And I don't think that terminology kind of fits well when it comes to communicating sometimes with other business leaders that are maybe outside of technology. Sometimes they think, well, the more you can optimize, obviously, the better it is. But that's not always the case.
We can't optimize everything.
Yeah. I do want to ask you some questions about, you mentioned software developers and engineers kind of as being that creative mindset. And I remember when I was in college, this was many over 20 years ago, and the idea of I'm not creative, I'm a computer scientist, mindset was kind of going around. And I never would have said I was creative until probably well after I was out of college and I was coding. And then someone told me, say, well, yeah, you are creative. You create solutions to problems, and that's kind of what you're doing. And I never really thought about it until that point. It kind of dawned on me, yeah, I guess we are kind of creative. We're doing the same thing, but our art's a little bit different than, a musician. But you mentioned at the beginning of the show that you're kind of, musically inclined and you're in a band. Can you talk a little bit about how those two things kind of relate to one another, leading creatives when it comes to product development and software engineering, as well as, being a musician?
It's the same job, I think.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. No, I mean, I think it's literally exactly the same thing. I mean, to touch on the definition of a creative, geez, if you're somebody who's being asked, as you say, to solve a problem,
right,
and you're not being handed the solution to it, well, then you're getting paid to come up with the solution for it. There are multiple ways to solve the problem. You need a lot of context around where the problems come from. There are advantages and disadvantages to doing it different ways. You probably need the help and collaboration of people who are very strong in areas that you're not as strong. You have ideas of people who are generalists. You have people who are much more specialists. And the reason to me it is exactly the same job is that whether you're a product manager, a music producer, songwriter, whatever it is, you're trying to create something that has no firm definition and yet will be valuable when it exists. And we sort of all know that it's going to be the thing when it exists. We recognize it when we see it. We recognize it when we hear it. We know what a great song is. We know what a great user experience is. We know what a successful product looks like when customers are using it and salespeople are selling it. How you get from nothing to that point of success is incredibly messy and involves the orchestration of lots of different people. I mean, session musicians are essentially subject matter experts, and they come with their own ideas. So what's your stance going to be? Is your stance going to be, no, 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 we wrote out the score, here's the piano part, you play the piano part? Or are you going to interview different people and listen to their background and what they've done with their instrument and how they think about their instrument, and then find one who's going to, bring the most to the table, bring them in and listen to their ideas and let them explore and give them coaching as they do different takes, and have a shared vocabulary. Like, oh yeah, well, we could do more of a, like a McCartney kind of bass line thing over here. We could do, more of an AC/DC guitar riff over here. And do you have a common vocabulary? It's very, very similar. Mm-hmm. And the magic there is not, the prerequisites are a high level of skill, a deep vocabulary and body of knowledge on the subject. And then the magic is when you get the chemistry of the group right, so that people feel really comfortable bringing ideas up and trying different things, failing fast, going down different paths. Are you comfortable trying a take that's in a completely different direction for a guitar solo and having everybody kind of laugh and say, well, that wasn't it? Yeah. It's the same thing of building, everybody loves to talk about MVPs. Mm-hmm. And then along with that, the idea of a prototype, the idea of just a demonstration of the vision, and a producer being able to do that, product manager being able to mock something up on a whiteboard or in Node.js or whatever it may be, is very similar to a songwriter being able to sit down and say, okay, you know what, I'm going to need a whole band, but let me get the bones of this thing down and show some of my friends, get some feedback, and think if I can get people excited about working on this. And that's, I think, the last point is just ultimately success comes down to hiring people who are better than you and trying to inspire them and let them blow you away and let them tell you where this project should go, where this art's going to come from.
I think that's really good. We had Roger Nierenberg on. He wrote a book called Maestro, and in his book, he talked about kind of how leading an orchestra and is a lot like leading a team of developers, because you have different groups and different departments and different areas that do different things. But until you see it from their perspective, you don't really understand the whole thing. And I think what you're saying kind of relates really closely to that. But I wanted to hit on one thing. You mentioned, building those teams. What are some key tips that you have for building such a great creative team or a software engineering team? How is it that, let's say, a new manager or someone that comes into a certain area, how can they go about building this team?
That's the question. And I don't think that we're asking that question enough. And so I'm glad you asked it, because I just really think it's all about the people. And, at the outset, let's also, I would state just, to kind of put a stake in the ground on this, that a diverse team is much more likely to be a high performing and successful team. And so, that puts a whole new lens on the recruiting and hiring perspective. Because in this day and age, you have to work harder. You have to recruit harder. You have to look beyond your immediate friend group. You have to get very creative and be building your network.
Yeah, I say this all the time that, being in an echo chamber, having people around you that are just like you'll never see your problems. You'll never get the new solutions. You'll never move forward unless you have diversity, that people that can come from different perspectives and see things with different lenses and communicate that to you. If everybody looks the same and acts the same and came from the same background, then you have no diversity, and there's no way that you can actually move forward, because you're all just bouncing the same ideas around.
I couldn't agree more. And I think the key there is to have really good recruiting hygiene, for recruiting to be a core part of the culture at every level, from associate individual contributor through chief whatever. Everybody should be involved in recruiting. And you should raise the bar, keep the bar higher and higher and higher, and be patient, build bigger slates, meet more candidates, be more patient. And I guarantee that by doing that, any team will see the needle move in terms of diversity and inclusivity in the broader sense, in a sense of belonging for the creatives on the team. And so that's where I would start, is basically, I was just having this conversation with my team, no matter what level you are, think about bringing your friends in to learn about your team, your company, and how you work. And before you bring your friends in, make new friends. Broaden your own circle of kind of social awareness. As you become more senior, go do speaking events, go be on panels, go get out there and shake hands and kiss babies, and do whatever it is that you need to do to kind of start to build this network.
Yeah, come on podcast, right?
Come on a podcast. Look, that's why I'm here. No, I mean, the number one thing, HubSpot.com/jobs. I mean, that's the number one reason for coming on. I love these conversations, and it's fun to reflect on this stuff. And it keeps us honest and gives us ideas of what we need to do next. But it's about recruiting.
Yeah.
The second thing is, and I think this is the biggest and most tragic mistake that happens: recruit people above you. If you're an associate product manager, it would be very easy to think, well, I met this person and they seem really great, but geez, they're a director of product at this other company. So what? Bring them in. They're joining the team. It's not about, I'm recruiting someone under me in my team for this thing. It's much more about, here's what we're doing. We have a mission. We have a culture and a way of working. We have a group of people who presumably are getting along and having some fun doing what they're doing. I mean, that's the great thing about software engineering and product work, is like, it's a ton of fun.
Yeah.
I mean, we code on the weekends. We code if we're at the beach, people pull out laptops. I mean, we love this stuff. And so just getting that energy out there. And then as you become more senior in your career, that's really what you want to be doing. I mean, if you're at the director level and above, absolutely. You want to be finding people who you think would never come and work for you. And you want to go find those people and recruit them and bring them in. And you'd be surprised, if your energy and enthusiasm for what you're doing is authentic, that's really what people want. They just want to be a part of something special, something meaningful.
Yeah, and don't focus. I think that's one of the things that I hear people focus on titles, like, I've seen people even at my company that said, oh, that person probably wouldn't be interested because they're a vice president of something, and we're just looking for a director here. And say, well, how do you know what a vice president is over there versus a vice president is over here? The jobs could be the same. Don't worry about the title. Worry about what they do, how interested they are, how. Even someone like me, I may be interested in making a change that is not an upward move when it comes to title, but maybe it's an upward move as far as culture, as far as excitement and activity and all those other things. And I think you're absolutely right. And I always have this montage: you shouldn't hire anybody that's not better at the job than you are.
I couldn't agree. I absolutely preaching to the choir. I think in recruiting too, I mean, the third thing that I would recommend people do is to be very transparent. Every company has positives and, aspects of it that are challenging, or maybe there are some of the positives are not positives for everybody, and what I like to do in interviews is really just say, hey, look, I'd love to know when you go to talk to your friends and family about this big decision you're making here, what are the things that the pieces of information about this team that you wish you had, but would be tough to bring up here? Fire away. And people go, oh, okay, all right, it's this. Is this part really true? Is the work flexibility in hours really true? Is this really true? What's it like for people who, are at this level? Or is there a career path for individual contributors? How does this all work? And I think that's a really important part of the process, is just to be human and empathetic to what a huge decision it is for somebody to come join a team. It's easy. You're sitting there interviewing somebody and you're going to walk out of the interview and go back to hang out with all your friends and, colleagues, and them all. And, this person's in the interview room and they're going to walk out and walk through those same corridors. And it's a total mystery in terms of what these people, who they are, what makes them tick, what they're like to work with. And so I just try to show as much of that as possible. And in our case, that is actually a pretty good selling tool because, it's a great place to work. And it's a terrific team. And once people are here, the feedback that we get is, this is a really great group of people, and I'm really glad I came. But I think transparency in interviews is really important.
Yeah, it's one of the sayings that I have around here is that trust comes from transparency, and if you want to hire someone that trusts you, that gets on board and trusts the company, you got to be transparent. And also, you mentioned getting that guy's or whoever the guy or gal, whoever you're interviewing's kind of mindset and perspective. Understand that if they already have a job, they're coming from they're risking something to come there, to an unknown. And it's very difficult sometimes to give up even something you don't like, as long as you know what it's about, to go somewhere you don't know. So the more you can show, here's what it's like. Let's peel the layers back. Let's let you see what we're doing here for real. I think that makes a big difference with welcoming that person on board.
We have one person here who leads design for us, and she made this huge decision to uproot her life in Wisconsin and moved to Boston. And after the process, when she got here and then she became a hiring manager, she sat me down one day and said, let me help you really wrap your head around what it's like for someone like me at the stage where I am in my career, particularly with a relocation, and what that experience is like. And that it was such an amazing moment, and it changed the way that we handle certain sort of closing sequences and conversations, and brought a level of empathy into those conversations that helped us really close some amazing candidates, where I think there was this kind of coda to the conversation of a little bit extra transparency about what they're getting into, because it affects different people in different ways, and the more that you can develop that empathy, and the examples go on and on in terms of different kinds of segments, or just offering transparency and offering a conversation to folks based on where their head and their heart might be in that whole process, and just letting them continue to ask questions will help you with the close. It'll help get to yes.
Mm-hmm. No, I think that's good. I think it shows a testament to kind of your involvement when it comes to people, to listening to that and taking that into account. Because I've met many executives over the years that I'm doing air quotes here, don't have time to understand what it was like for someone and try to incorporate that into the hiring process. I think that's one of the things that they always miss out on. You're missing out on great candidates by not taking that time.
I mean, especially for executives, quote unquote, it should be, I don't know what, 40% of your time, 60% of your time.
Yeah. At least. I mean, your job is to build the people up under you, right?
Dude, it's the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's the whole ball game. I consider myself lucky enough to have the role of kind of product managing the team.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not a frontline product manager with a part of the product, but I'm a frontline product manager of what's working, what do we need, how do we get the best ideas in here, how do we get people happy and doing their best work. And recruiting is at least half that.
Yeah. It's especially in technology. You work for a company that creates technology products, and it's extremely difficult sometimes to keep people and to hire people. And I know where I live in Charlotte, North Carolina, I was talking to someone the other day, and they were telling me that in their full stack development positions that are available, we have a negative unemployment rate in the area, which is just insane. To think about that. There's so many people out there, or so many jobs out there, that even if everybody that was looking had a job, there would still be open jobs.
That's just awesome. I hear it's absolutely amazing down there, by the way. I hear that's a really wonderful place to live.
The weather's awesome, except for this summer's been super hot. But I guess it's been hot everywhere. I saw an article yesterday that we were in some kind of July was like the record hottest month ever or something like that. It's crazy. But yeah, it's an awesome place. I love it down here. The people are so nice. And being in technology, if you're not in Silicon Valley, Charlotte's probably the next best place to be when it comes to technology, in my opinion, because you have all the banks kind of right around here, and you have a Microsoft here. We've got lots of good places, good opportunities.
Oh, that's fantastic.
So I wanted to shift gears just a little bit and have you talk a little bit about the providers and kind of, how you got back into music after taking some time off and working on technology, and what that transition back was like, and kind of what it's like, working two areas. You're kind of doing two things, sort of like I am with the podcast too. But what is that like for you?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I majored in music. I graduated. I eventually got into technology professionally after trying to work in music. It was very
Oh yeah.
hard. Yeah, I was doing a lot of production and recording, field recording, classical, jazz, Brazilian, all sorts of singer-songwriter, all sorts of different stuff. And it was just really hard to kind of, make the I made a spreadsheet one day, and that was basically the day that I decided that I needed to do something else. And so, I was lucky to find a career where I got to do a lot of the same sort of creative peer leadership stuff that I really liked about music.
Mm-hmm.
And then as I said, in my 20s, I got really into building and coding, UI, design, all these different kinds of disciplines, and building just dozens of side projects and stuff over the years. There got to a point around 2015 where I just couldn't do it anymore. I had too much responsibility in the technology part of the world to have even the brain space, or the time. I had babies, around that period, 2013, 2014. And then there was a day when our then VP of engineering walked in, and I had, a code editor up, and he just walked over and, command queued it, just quit out of it. And without stopping walking, he just said, "You're done." So,
Wow.
I still had that creative itch, though. I really still had that creative itch. And so I started playing a lot more guitar. I had grown up playing guitar and singing and writing songs, and started playing guitar much more, producing music again on my laptop much more, and built up a bunch of songs. Probably did 200 different song ideas, and out of those, maybe 6 or 7 seemed pretty interesting. And I didn't play them for anybody until I finally got the gumption up to call this fellow Brad Helene, who is this 62-year-old rock and roll blues legend around the Northeast. He's been playing for 40 years plus, 45 years professionally. He's never done anything other than be a professional creative, sideman and producer.
Mm-hmm.
And I had the fortune of working with him on a couple of records, 10 years ago, 15 years ago. And we had hit it off. I was sort of intimidated by how good he was, and the respect that all of the people in the room, in the band that we were working with, everybody had this deep respect for him and sort of reverence for him. And finally one day, I just said, "Oh, let me just call the guy up." So I hit him up on Facebook, and he gave me a call, and we got together. We made some noise, and in the next day, he called me and he said, "Okay, we can sit around and play Jimi Hendrix covers until we're blue in the face, but do you have any material? Do you have something that we could actually work on together?" And that's so cool. That's that moment when a potential co-founder is excited enough by being stuck in a room with you to build something, and here's this like legendary guy. And so I sent him the demos, and he called me right back, and he said, "All right, we're making a record." And that was about 2 years ago. We started rehearsing those tunes with session musicians, did it totally old school, rehearsed our butts off, went into the big studio. It's like going back to 1972, which is really, really cool, because I spend my days in this kind of, Willy Wonka high tech world, which is great, and I love cold brew coffee, and I love having candy, available everywhere. And it's all really nice. But it was cool to go back in time into a big, analog studio with grumpy session musicians, but once they see the vision, man, it's the same thing. It's just like what we do in our day jobs. It's like, once they see the vision and once they hear it, you just got to get out of the way. You just got to shut up and hit record. So we've been working on this record for 2 years, and we're going to release it this fall. We have some really exciting folks working on the record with us in the final stages of it, mixing, mastering, and promoting the record. So theproviders.com, people can go there and sign up. We're going to send out all kinds of free stuff and some cool videos, backstory on our story and how we got to where we are. musically, and it's fun. It's a pop rock record. It's sort of like Tom Petty, U2, Red Hot Chili Peppers, that kind of record that doesn't get made much anymore. Even Led Zeppelin, notes of Led Zeppelin in there at different times. So it's sort of the 70s, 80s, 90s rock record that, as I say, it's not the kind of record that gets made too much anymore, but we think it's pretty catchy, and the songs are going to get stuck in people's heads, and we'll have some fun with it.
Are you guys going to be touring?
For now, we're not, because, our lives are here. Brad's been in the back of a van for 45 years and is still touring like crazy, because that's what he does for work. And I have little kids, and the record is this huge sound. We would need like 13 people to tour, and it's just not, back to that conversation. What do you optimize? What do you de-optimize? And that was a hard conversation, because I actually really wanted to play out and put together a show band to do that stuff. But we got to get the record out there and the story. I think what's great is in this day and age of social media, we can take the calories we would spend on rehearsing to play live and spend those on telling the story and, getting into the lyrics and creating content, getting that content out there so that people can be engaged with us without, having to go buy a ticket once a year to come and see us. So we'll see.
Yeah, no, I think that's that's great. And, I'm the same way. I've got 3 kids, and, when I started the podcast, one of the goals of the podcast was, because I was speaking at conferences, I thought, well, I'm going to start this podcast, and then that'll help me speak at even bigger conferences and all this stuff. And I got to the point where why am I even going to speak at conferences when I can just talk here, and I can share the information I have here, and I can connect with people here. Now, I still go to conferences. I still speak there occasionally, but the volume has definitely gone down as I spend more time in here, because I feel like I can get more done and not have to focus on the travel aspect and be away from my family or kids and still have that communication. So I was kind of curious of how you're living that path too.
Yeah, I think that's great, and the idea of, maybe writing a book someday or something like that, hearing more and more people who don't have to go out on the road as public speakers or, thought leaders, or promoting a book or promoting a band on the road, being able to do it and actually reach more people with more and fresher content, and also be able to be there for family, which is really, nothing that I do in my life I'm doing for any reason other than, to have a great life with my family. I mean, my kids and my wife come first before everything.
Yeah, and that kind of goes back to the whole idea of people first, right? Your family's first to you, and then if other people have that same mentality and you offer that same respect to them, that their family is most important, that's going to help you keep people and draw more people in, because people want to be a part of something like that.
I couldn't agree more.
So let's say, what advice would you have to someone who's trying to build that creative team, but they really don't have a whole lot of headcount to new people to hire? How can they possibly coach or mentor the folks that they have to help build that that better team?
The way that I think about that largely comes down to a mindset shift into a world where every single person that you're managing or mentoring, if they don't work for you, every single one of those people, your goal is to want to go work for them. And if you kind of shift the lens there from how do I coach this person on the sort of duties of the day and the programs that they are running and the the things that they're pursuing, which of course we have to do as supervisors and leaders and friends, frankly, peers, at every level. But what is the gap? Like, why wouldn't I go work for this person? And even make that a conversation, make that an open conversation. And also really figure out, this is part and parcel with that, but figure out what people want to do, and where they want to go. Not in an interview, where do you see yourself in 5 years? But like, hey, what are your dreams? Is your dream to retire early? Is your dream to be able to travel? Is your dream to have a big team? Is it to become the best in the world at one aspect of what you do? And try to get that conversation going so that there's just a much wider palette of ways to invest in that person. And those especially with high performers, they're going to have energy to grow. They're going to have time. They're going to have mental space, either during the workday, outside the workday, whatever it is. And the role we can take is to help them learn to develop the curriculum for themselves to become a broader, deeper, more authentic contributor and someday leader than they are. It really comes down to deeply investing in the team. And one of the things you can do there is give them your projects. Ride shotgun with them on big important things that you would otherwise do. If you see something that looks like it's going to be a lot of fun, but you've done it 4 or 5 times, think about putting it in the hands of somebody on your team who you can then coach through that process, because maybe they've never done it, and maybe it's actually a huge stretch for them to do it. But with your help, they can grow through it. And what you want to do is you want to wake up one day and see that all these people that you've been managing could do your job. And by the way, that's when you get promoted.
Yep. That's exactly right. You always have to build somebody up that can do what you're doing so that you can do more, and give them kind of what you're working on. I really like, I was taking a bunch of notes about things that I can do with my team as well. Cause when I do one-on-ones, I try to focus, at least once every 6 months or so, focusing on, where do they see themselves in their career, to see what has changed since last time. And, but I like the idea of talking about their dreams, outside of work, traveling. Do you want to retire early? All those things that you mentioned. I'm definitely going to put that into my one-on-ones as well as another topic that we can talk about from time to time, because I think that's important. It's one of those things that you talk to people, but maybe they don't share the fact that they wish they could travel more than they do today. And it might be something that you can help them with, even if it's not the fun travel, but maybe there's some conferences in some odd places that normally you would go to, but hey, maybe you can delegate that and send someone that does love to travel and wants to go maybe to some of those places.
It's amazing how serendipitous the opportunity, once you start having those conversations, the problems that are the perfect problems for these people to solve just seem to pop up out of thin air.
Yeah.
I think that's super key, and the thing there too is it builds trust.
Mm-hmm.
And people don't quit jobs, they quit bosses.
That's right.
So, the more that you as a boss, as a supervisor, can be involved in that kind of growth and that arc and that story and the daydreaming, like, let's get the daydreaming happening at work. Let's go. It doesn't need to be one totally separate conversation at home with your spouse, venting about the stuff you don't like, and then coming in and pretending everything is great at work because you're scared of losing your job. If you can give your people enough psychological safety and enough space so that they can say what's really working and not working, then you end up doing really creative things. And you send someone to Europe for 6 months to do this project, and then they come back and they're happy to continue working in Boston where they grew up. All of these. There are a million examples of these kinds of creative solutions that you can come up with once you have that conversation.
Yeah, I think that's key is having that conversation, and that's one of the things that leaders need to do. I think a better job of is giving that safe place that people can talk about things that they don't like, things that they're not happy with, and I try to do my best. And one of the things I've started doing recently that has been I found it very beneficial is, instead of having one-on-ones in my office where it's my domain, it's my area, they feel uncomfortable maybe coming in because it's not their place, is to do it somewhere neutral, somewhere outside. We take a walk around the pond and let's do a walking one-on-one.
Oh, I love those.
Yeah, it's fantastic. It's made a huge difference just with my team, which I always thought were open, and they would tell me things they didn't like. But once we got outside, it got even more. I got a layer deeper, which is awesome.
I completely relate to that. In the building I'm sitting in now, we built out for the R&D group, product and engineering. And, the architects at first, they wanted all of these 6-person conference rooms. And we said, we don't really, we need some of those. But you know what we really need? We need a ton of really comfortable, non-confrontational one-on-one rooms. And so we have 16 of these rooms that are they're almost like little therapist offices. They're like little spa waiting rooms almost, and there's no table separating the two people, and there are whiteboards, you can collaborate, and it's just very chill. And that's if you can't get outside, at least having some space like that. And we actually have no offices. So there are days when I wish I had an office, but no, I mean, it's everybody's shoulder to shoulder, and then we share the space, and that creates a non-confrontational vibe too.
Yeah, that it's definitely, you see the difference when you go to like a newer building with a tech company in it versus an older building with and a different non-tech company as far as the layout, as far as offices and cubes, and the open floor plan and not having walls, and all that good stuff. So this has been a great conversation. I really enjoyed it, and I think I've learned a lot that I can take back to my team, and hopefully our audience has learned a lot too. Do you have any last tips for growing a great team that you would want to give leaders out there?
I think getting feedback is really important too. If I had to throw one more thing into the mix, it's like at every level, understanding where you're going to get your feedback and actively going out and getting it, and having a mindset where you really actually want it. Everybody kind of knows how you're doing better than you know how you're doing. And I don't just mean your boss. It may be that your boss is the last to know. As a boss, I'm often the last to know. I'm working on it. But, peers and people in different departments, the people if you look at your calendar and look at the 10 people you've spent the most time with in the last 90 days, how do you create an environment where you really get the feedback from them of what's working and not working? And I guarantee that, as hard as an experience as that can be psychologically to do, I guarantee any leader will come out of it with more confidence and a mindset that there are some real strengths to lean into. And feedback is not just about weaknesses and getting beaten down of what makes what irks people about you. A lot of it is, hey, this is what we're looking for from this person, and when they do it, it's exactly what the team needs. And when you get that feedback, you sleep easier at night, and you go, okay, that's the thing they need me to do. So I think getting feedback is super key, and don't just rely on getting it from one person or another. I get most of my feedback from peers at work, and I get it quarterly, I get it daily, and it's just super, super valuable.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think no one sees or everyone sees your faults better than you do. So yeah, I think getting feedback is super key and crucial. So how can people find out more about Christopher O'Donnell, the providers, and HubSpot?
Yeah, so HubSpot.com/jobs. That's the big one. We have hundreds of open roles. We're leaning into remote positions. We have 8 offices around the world. We'd love to talk to you, whoever you are, not just engineers. We love engineers. We're hiring tons of engineers, like everybody else is, but across all of our departments, sales and marketing and services, finance, legal, everything. We're growing like crazy. It's a super great place to work. You literally could work from anywhere in the world, potentially, now that we're really leaning into remote. So I encourage everybody to check out HubSpot.com/jobs. And I encourage folks to hop to theproviders.com, pop your email address in there, and we'll send you some fun free stuff as we get the launch closer. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much. I really appreciate it. It's been a great conversation.
John, this is great. I'll talk to you soon.
All right. I hope you guys enjoyed that episode with Christopher O'Donnell. Hope you learned something, a little bit about product management and just general leadership. I really enjoyed having Chris on from HubSpot. I think HubSpot's a great company. They have a great culture. And I did want to read one review. As I mentioned before, we'll be reading reviews on the show. So if you haven't left one, head on over to Apple Podcasts, formerly known as iTunes, and leave a rating and review. That'd be greatly appreciated. This one comes from Scott Lowe. It says, nice leadership perspectives. John offers some nice perspectives on leadership, which is, as others have pointed out in the reviews, something in which a lot of geeks and technical folks struggle. If you're moving into or want to move into more of a leadership role in your career, this podcast may be worth adding to your listening routine. Thank you, Scott, for that. I greatly appreciate it. And anybody else who wants to leave a review, just please do it. I'll read some of those on the show. Thanks so much.